Dr. Sarah Chun wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished stitching up the wounded Kaleri soldier. The alien's blue-green skin had turned pale from blood loss, but the six-armed warrior would live to fight another day. Around her, the emergency medical station buzzed with activity as human medics worked alongside alien healers to treat casualties from the recent Zephyrian assault. Dr. Chun called Commander Torres from across the tent. You're needed at the command center immediately. Sarah pulled off her blood-stained gloves and followed the commander through the bustling camp. The refugee settlement on Kepler 442b had grown exponentially over the past months as species after species fled the advancing Zephyrian Empire. What had started as a small research outpost was now home to nearly 500,000 beings from dozens of worlds. The command center was a converted cargo container filled with holographic displays and communication arrays. At the center table stood General Vexstar, a towering Thorion with chitinous armor and 4 compound eyes. Despite his intimidating appearance, Sarah had grown to respect the alien military leader during their months of cooperation. Dr. Chun, Vexstar's translator device converted his clicking speech into English. We have received troubling intelligence from our scouts. A holographic map materialized above the table, showing the contested star system. Red markers indicated Zephyrian-controlled territories, while blue showed the dwindling free zones. Sarah noticed several new red areas that hadn't been there yesterday. Zephyrians have taken the Nexari homeworld, Commander Torres explained grimly. But that's not the worst news. General Vexstar manipulated the display, zooming in on a massive space station orbiting a dying star. This is the Crimson Throne, flagship of Queen Zarathul herself. Our sources indicate she has brought something with her. Something that has our intelligence networks terrified. Sarah studied the alien faces around her. She had learned to read the subtle expressions of various species over the months, and what she saw was genuine fear. What kind of something? A creature, Vexstar replied, his mandibles clicking nervously. The Zephyrians call it the Void Render. According to our spies, it's unlike anything in known biology. The Queen uses it as her personal executioner, but also as a weapon of terror. Entire populations surrender rather than face it. The hologram shifted to show grainy surveillance footage of a massive, writhing form moving through what appeared to be a space station corridor. The image quality was poor, but Sarah could make out serpentine movements and what looked like multiple rows of teeth. The problem, Commander Torres continued, is that Queen Zarathul has issued an ultimatum. She demands the surrender of all human settlements and the execution of human leadership. In exchange, she promises to spare the other species currently under our protection. Sarah felt her stomach drop. And if we refuse? She will unleash the Void Render on the refugee camps, Vexstar answered. Our xenobiologists estimate casualties in the hundreds of thousands within hours of its arrival. The tent fell silent except for the humming of equipment. Sarah looked around at her colleagues and allies, seeing the same helpless expression on every face. They had fought bravely against impossible odds, but this felt different. This felt final. There has to be something we can do, Sarah said finally. Some weakness we can exploit. General Vexstar's compound eyes focused on her with what she had learned was intense concentration among his species. That is why we called you here, Doctor. You have experience with xenobiology that surpasses most beings in this sector. You've treated injuries and illnesses from 47 different species in the past 6 months alone. Sarah shook her head. I'm just a veterinarian who happened to be on the right transport when this war started. I'm not some miracle worker. Perhaps, said a new voice from the tent entrance. But you are the only being who has successfully treated a Zephyrian prisoner. Sarah turned to see Dr. Kethmori, an insectoid hive mind representative, entering the command center. The alien's multiple arms carried data tablets and what appeared to be biological samples. The prisoner you treated 3 weeks ago, Dr. Kethmori continued, provided some interesting information before his interrogation was complete. He spoke of the Void Render with a mixture of worship and terror. But he also mentioned something curious. He said the creature had been broken by its captivity. Sarah recalled the wounded Zephyrian soldier she had treated. Most of their enemies fought with fanatic devotion, but that particular warrior had seemed different. Haunted almost. Broken how? She asked. Dr. Kethmorius' antennae twitched in what Sarah recognized as uncertainty among his species. He used a term that doesn't translate well. The closest approximation would be spiritually wounded or soul-sick. He claimed the creature was not originally a weapon, but had been transformed into one through torture and conditioning. General Vextar leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the holographic display. If the creature is indeed suffering from some form of psychological trauma, it might be possible to reach it, to communicate with it. You want me to treat the Queen's monster? Sarah asked incredulously. We want you to try, Commander Torres replied. Our intelligence suggests that Queen Zarathil will arrive in this system within 72 hours. If there's any chance of neutralizing this threat without massive bloodshed, we have to take it. Sarah stared at the surveillance footage still playing on repeat. The creature moved with obvious pain, its massive form contorting in ways that seemed unnatural even for an alien biology. As a veterinarian, she had seen countless animals suffering from abuse and trauma. Something about the Void Render's movements triggered those same professional instincts. What makes you think I can get close enough to even attempt communication? She asked. Dr. Kethmori stepped forward, offering her one of his data tablets. Because, Dr. Chun, you won't be approaching it as an enemy. You'll be approaching it as a patient. The tablet displayed a complex schematic of the Crimson Throne, with detailed layouts of the ship's bio-containment sections. Sarah recognized the design elements from her study of Zephyrian medical facilities during her treatment of their prisoners. We have a plan, General Vextar announced. But it requires someone with your specific expertise and, frankly, your particular human stubbornness to even attempt it. Sarah looked around the command center one more time, seeing hope beginning to replace despair in the alien faces surrounding her. Outside the tent, she could hear the sounds of the refugee camp. Children of a dozen species playing together, families sharing meals, beings who had lost everything but found new purpose in their unity. Tell me about this plan, she said quietly. The plan was insane, which probably meant it was perfectly human in its conception. Sarah sat in the cramped cockpit of a stolen Zephyrian medical transport, her hands trembling slightly as she reviewed the false credentials Dr. Kethmorius' people had created for her. According to the documents, she was Dr. Senna Vorthak, a renowned Zephyrian xenobiologist summoned by Queen Zarathil herself to examine the Void Render. Remember, came General Vextar's voice through her hidden communicator, you have perhaps 30 minutes before their security systems detect the forgery. The moment you're aboard that ship, you're on your own. Sarah adjusted the biomask that altered her appearance to match Zephyrian facial features. The technology was impressive but uncomfortable, creating the illusion of the distinctive ridge, patterns and color variations that marked Zephyrian nobility. Her human physique was hidden beneath loose-fitting robes common among Zephyrian scientists. Transport Vessel Healing Wing, you are cleared for Docking Bay 7, came the crisp voice of Crimson Throne's flight controller. Proceed immediately to Bio-Containment Level 5 upon arrival. Her Majesty does not tolerate delays. Acknowledged, Crimson Throne, Sarah replied, grateful for the vocal modulator that gave her voice the proper Zephyrian inflection. Dr. Vorthak responding, I have reviewed the preliminary reports. The situation appears quite serious. She guided the transport through the massive docking bay of the flagship, marveling at the ship's size despite her nervousness. The Crimson Throne was essentially a mobile fortress, large enough to house 1 million beings and equipped with weapons capable of glassing entire planets. The fact that Queen Zarathil felt the need to keep the Void Render on such a vessel spoke to the creature's dangerous nature. Sarah's medical training kicked in as she observed the ship's crew during her escort to the bio-containment levels. The Zephyrian soldiers moved with obvious unease, their typically confident demeanor replaced by nervous glances and hurried steps. Whatever they were keeping down there, it terrified even them. The elevator descended for what felt like an eternity, passing through multiple security checkpoints. Each scan made Sarah's heart race, but the forged credentials held. Finally, the doors opened onto a corridor that reeked of fear and antiseptic. "Dr. Vorthek," greeted a tall Zephyrian female with the distinctive markings of a high-ranking scientist. "I am Research Director Kalashin. Thank you for responding so quickly to Her Majesty's summons." Sarah nodded in what she hoped was an appropriately arrogant manner for Zephyrian nobility. "The reports were disturbing. Show me to the subject immediately." They walked through corridors lined with observation windows looking into various containment cells. Sarah glimpsed several alien creatures she didn't recognize, all appearing to be in various states of distress or injury. Her veterinary instincts screamed at the obvious signs of abuse and neglect. "The Queen acquired the render from the Void Walkers of the Cygnus sector," Kalashin explained as they walked. "Originally, it was some sort of guardian creature, possibly even sentient. Our conditioning protocols have been extensive." Sarah struggled to maintain her composure as the full implications hit her. They hadn't just captured a dangerous animal. They had broken a sentient being and turned it into a weapon through systematic torture, her hands clenched into fists beneath her robes. "Recent behavioral patterns suggest possible psychological deterioration," Kalashin continued, apparently oblivious to Sarah's reaction. "The creature has become increasingly unresponsive to standard conditioning stimuli. Her Majesty fears it may be becoming unreliable." They stopped before a massive blast door marked with warning symbols in a dozen languages. Through the reinforced window, Sarah could see into a vast chamber filled with what appeared to be twisted metal and organic growths. At first, she couldn't locate the creature itself. Then it moved. The void render was enormous, easily 50 feet in length, with a serpentine body covered in what looked like living shadow. Multiple appendages that might have been arms or tentacles extended from its torso, each ending in configurations that hurt to look at directly. Its head was vaguely draconic, but wrong in ways that defied description, but it was the eyes that made Sarah's breath catch. Hidden beneath ridges of twisted flesh were eyes that held intelligence, pain, and something that might have been hope. "Fascinating," she managed to say in character. "How long since its last conditioning session?" 18 hours, Kalashin replied, checking her datapad. "We've been using increasingly aggressive neural stimulation, but the results have been disappointing." Sarah watched the creature move within its prison. Every motion spoke of agony, both physical and psychological. Scars covered its body where various instruments had been used to modify its biology. But underneath the obvious trauma, she could see traces of what it had once been. The way it moved when it thought no one was watching suggested grace and intelligence that no amount of conditioning had been able to completely destroy. "I need to examine it more closely," Sarah announced. "Have the chamber prepared for entry." Kalashin's head snapped toward her in shock. "Entry? Dr. Vorthek? Surely you don't intend to go inside with it?" "No being has entered that chamber and survived since the early conditioning phases." "I am not just any being," Sarah replied with forced arrogance. "I have successfully treated subjects that other researchers have deemed hopeless. If you want the creature functional for Her Majesty's plans, I need direct access." The research director's uncertainty was obvious, but she apparently wasn't willing to question someone supposedly sent by the Queen herself. "Very well, but we will maintain constant monitoring and emergency containment protocols." As preparations began, Sarah activated her hidden communicator with a subtle gesture. "I'm about to attempt contact," she whispered when she was certain no one was listening. "If this goes wrong, tell everyone I tried." "Sarah," came Commander Torres's distant voice, "remember that creature has been trained to kill. Don't let compassion cloud your judgment." But as Sarah watched the void render through the observation window, she saw something the Zephyrians had missed. The creature wasn't looking at the walls or guards with hatred. It was looking at them with resignation and exhaustion. This wasn't a monster that wanted to kill. This was a broken soul that wanted to die. The chamber's airlock cycled open with a hiss that seemed to echo through the entire biocontainment level. Sarah stepped forward, medical scanner in hand, trying to project the confidence of a Zephyrian researcher while her heart hammered against her ribs. The moment she entered the chamber, the Void Render's massive head turned toward her. Those intelligent eyes fixed on hers, and Sarah saw something that made her forget to breathe. Recognition. Not of her specifically, but of what she represented. For the first time in what might have been years, someone had entered its prison without weapons or instruments of torture. Sarah took another step forward, her scanner detecting readings that made no sense according to any biology she knew. But underlying the impossible energy signatures and alien physiology, she recognized patterns she had seen before in traumatized animals. "Easy," she whispered, not caring if the monitors picked up her words. "I'm not here to hurt you." The creature's response was not what anyone expected. Instead of aggression or submission, it made a sound that was unmistakably a whimper, a sound of such profound sadness that it brought tears to Sarah's eyes. That was when she knew that the only way to save everyone was to heal this broken soul, regardless of the consequences. Sarah knelt slowly in the center of the Void Render's chamber, her medical scanner forgotten as she focused entirely on the massive creature before her. The beast's breathing was labored, each exhale creating small clouds of what appeared to be luminescent vapor. Up close, she could see the full extent of the modifications that had been made to its body. Neural interface ports had been surgically implanted along its spine, still weeping a silver fluid that her scanner identified as some kind of synthetic neurotransmitter. Sections of its natural armor had been replaced with cybernetic enhancements designed to amplify its destructive capabilities. But most disturbing were the psychological conditioning scars. Burn marks in precise patterns that suggested systematic behavioral modification through pain. "My God," she whispered, her veterinary training taking over despite the alien nature of her patient. "What did they do to you?" The creature's head lowered until it was nearly touching the floor, a position Sarah recognized from her work with traumatized animals. It was making itself as small and non-threatening as possible. Despite being 50 feet long and capable of tearing apart a battleship. Through the observation window, she could see Research Director Kalatian speaking rapidly into a communication device. Whatever readings they were getting from inside the chamber weren't matching their expectations. Sarah knew she didn't have much time before they realized something was wrong. Moving carefully, she reached into her medical kit and withdrew a small device she had built specifically for this moment. Dr. Kethmoris. Analysis of Zephyrian neural conditioning technology had given her insights into how the creature's original nervous system might have functioned before the modifications. "I'm going to try to help you," she said softly, approaching the creature's massive head. "But I need you to trust me." The Void Render's eyes opened fully for the first time since she had entered. They were larger than her entire torso, swirling with colors that seemed to shift between dimensions. But within those alien depths she saw something unmistakably familiar. The look of an animal that had given up hope, suddenly presented with the possibility of kindness. Sarah activated her device, sending out a carefully calibrated signal designed to interfere with the neural conditioning implants. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The creature's entire body shuddered as years of forced behavioral programming began to conflict with its returning natural responses. Alarms began blaring throughout the biocontainment level. Through the observation window, Sarah could see Kalatian frantically activating emergency protocols. Within seconds, armed guards would be rushing to the chamber. The Void Render began making sounds unlike anything in the reports. Not roars of rage or hisses of aggression, but something that Sarah's translator couldn't process. It took her a moment to realize why. The creature was trying to speak in its original language, vocal patterns that had been suppressed for so long that the ship's computers didn't recognize them. "Dr. Vorthak." Kalatian's voice echoed through the chamber's speakers. "Exit the chamber immediately. The subject is exhibiting unprecedented neural activity." Sarah ignored the command, instead moving closer to the creature's head. The neural interface ports were sparking as her signal disrupted their connections, causing the silver fluid to flow more rapidly. She could see that the cybernetic components were fighting against the creature's returning consciousness, creating a dangerous feedback loop. "I know," she said, placing her hand on what appeared to be the least modified section of the creature's head. "I know it hurts, but you have to fight through it." The skin beneath her hand was surprisingly warm, pulsing with a rhythm that reminded her of a heartbeat but more complex. As her device continued its work, she began to sense something extraordinary. The creature wasn't just regaining consciousness. It was remembering. Images began flooding her mind through some kind of psychic connection. She saw the creature as it had once been, swimming through the void between stars, tending to something that might have been gardens of living light. She saw its people, beings of incredible grace and intelligence who had shaped reality itself through their will and wisdom. Then came the darker memories. The attack by Zephyrian forces. The capture. The long months of torture disguised as conditioning. The systematic destruction of everything that had made it who it was, replaced by artificial instincts for violence and obedience. But strongest of all was the creature's original name for itself. Not Void Render, but something that translated roughly to Guardian of the Deep Currents. It had been a protector, not a destroyer. The chamber door burst open as Zephyrian security forces charged in, weapons raised. The Void Render's massive head snapped toward them, and for a moment Sarah feared that its conditioning would reassert itself. Instead, the creature did something that made every being in the room stop in shock. It spoke, not in the guttural roars they had trained it to make, but in a voice like cosmic wind through stellar nurseries. The words were in its original language, but somehow Sarah understood their meaning. "Please," it said. "No more." The lead guard's weapon wavered as the full implications hit everyone present. They hadn't been controlling a beast. They had been torturing a person. Research Director Kalashin's voice cut through the stunned silence. "Impossible. The neural conditioning removed all higher brain functions. It cannot be sentient." Sarah stood slowly, her hands still touching the creature's head. "The conditioning didn't remove anything. It just buried it under layers of artificial programming. This being has been conscious and aware through everything you've done to it." The creature's eyes met hers again, and she saw gratitude mixed with something else. Determination. The guardian of the deep. Currents was remembering not just who it had been, but why it had chosen to protect others in the first place. "Dr. Vorthak," Kalishin said, her voice tight with growing suspicion. "Your methods are highly irregular. I'm beginning to question your credentials." Sarah smiled, dropping all pretense of her Zephyrian disguise. "That's probably because I'm not Dr. Vorthak. I'm Dr. Sarah Chun, human veterinarian, and I'm here to help this being remember what it means to choose." The guards raised their weapons again. But before anyone could fire, the chamber filled with a sound like singing starlight. The Void Render was communicating not just with Sarah, but with something beyond the ship itself, through the psychic connection she had established. Sarah felt the creature reaching out across space, calling to others of its kind. The guardian of the deep currents was no longer alone, and its people were listening. The ship's lights flickered as something vast and ancient turned its attention toward the Crimson Throne. Queen Zarathal's flagship, for all its power, was about to receive visitors it was completely unprepared to face. "What have you done?" Kalashin whispered. Sarah looked at the research director with a mixture of pity and determination. "What I should have done the moment I learned what you had done to this being. I've given it back its voice." Outside the chamber, emergency alerts were beginning to sound throughout the ship as sensor arrays detected massive forms approaching through hyperspace. The Void Walkers of the Cygnus sector had found their lost guardian, and they were coming to take it home. Queen Zarathal's arrival in the bio-containment level was announced by the sound of marching boots and the distinctive hum of Royal Guard energy shields. Sarah maintained her position beside the guardian of the deep currents, her hands still, providing what comfort she could as the creature continued its slow recovery from years of conditioning. The queen herself was an imposing figure, even by Zephyrian standards. Nearly 8 feet tall with ceremonial armor that incorporated living tissue and mechanical components, she moved with the confidence of someone who had conquered entire star systems. Her 4 arms gestured dismissively at the guards as she entered the chamber. "So," Queen Zarathil said, her voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that marked Zephyrian royalty, "this is the human veterinarian who believes she can undo years of careful conditioning with primitive medical techniques." Sarah stood slowly, meeting the Queen's gaze without flinching. "I'm the human veterinarian who has restored a sentient being's consciousness after you tried to turn it into a weapon through torture." The Queen's laugh was like breaking glass. "Sentient? This creature was barely above animal intelligence when we acquired it. We elevated it, gave it purpose, made it useful. You broke it," Sarah replied firmly. "You took a guardian and tried to turn it into a killer. But the consciousness was always there, just buried under your conditioning." As if responding to their conversation, the guardian lifted its massive head and spoke again in its native tongue. This time, Sarah's hidden translator had time to process the alien language, converting the cosmic harmonies into words. "I remember. The deep currents," it said, its voice carrying sadness and hope in equal measure. "I remember my purpose. I remember my people." Queen Zarathil's expression shifted from amusement to concern as the ship's communication systems crackled to life. "Your Majesty," came the voice of the bridge commander, "we're detecting massive hyperspace distortions approaching our position. Estimated arrival in 15 minutes. The Queen activated her personal communicator. "Nature of the distortions?" "Unknown, Majesty. The energy signatures don't match any known species in our databases. They're enormous, possibly larger than our ship." Sarah felt the Guardian's emotions through their psychic connection. Joy, relief, and something that might have been called love. Its people were coming, drawn by the distress call it had finally been able to send. "Your pet has doomed us all," Queen Zarathil snarled at Sarah. "The Void Walkers are a myth, a story used to frighten children. But if they do exist, their reputation suggests they show no mercy to those who harm their own." "Then maybe," Sarah said quietly, "you should consider returning what belongs to them." The Queen's 4 arms spread in a gesture of absolute authority. "I bow to no one, human. This creature is mine by right of conquest. If its former owners wish to reclaim it, they can try to take it from my dead hands." What happened next defied every law of physics Sarah thought she understood. The guardian of the deep currents began to glow, not with artificial lighting but with something that seemed to come from between the spaces of reality. The cybernetic modifications implanted in its body sparked and failed as its natural abilities reasserted themselves. The creature spoke again, but this time Sarah understood without translation. It was communicating directly with her mind, sharing concepts that human language couldn't properly express. "My people come," it told her. "They bring judgment for those who steal children from the deep currents. But you, small guardian, you have shown kindness where none was expected. This will be remembered." The ship shuddered as something massive made contact with the Crimson Throne's hull. Through the chamber's viewports, Sarah could see forms moving outside that hurt to look at directly. The Void Walkers existed in dimensions beyond normal space, creatures of pure consciousness that could manipulate matter and energy through will alone. Queen Zarathil's confidence finally cracked as her communicator erupted with panicked reports from across the ship. "Majesty, they're everywhere. Our weapons won't lock onto them. They're moving through our hull like it doesn't exist." "Impossible," the Queen muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. "No species can phase through neutronium armor." Sarah watched. As the Guardian's cybernetic implants continued to fail, dissolving like sugar in water as the creature's natural biology reasserted itself. The neural conditioning ports sealed themselves, healing wounds that had been deliberately kept open for years. "They're not moving through your hull," Sarah explained as understanding dawned. "They're moving through the spaces between matter. They exist in dimensions we can barely perceive." The chamber's blast doors suddenly weren't there anymore. Not destroyed or opened, simply not there, as if they had never existed. Through the empty doorway flowed beings that Sarah's mind struggled to process. They appeared as shifting patterns of light and shadow, sometimes taking forms that might have been tentacles or wings, sometimes appearing almost humanoid, before shifting into geometries that made her eyes water, but their emotional presence was unmistakable. These were parents who had found their lost child. The largest of the Voidwalkers approached the Guardian, communicating in harmonies that bypassed sound entirely. Sarah felt their conversation through her connection with the Guardian, understanding it as concepts rather than words. Grief for the suffering their child had endured, rage at those who had inflicted it, and gratitude toward the small being who had offered kindness in a place of cruelty. Queen Zarathul raised her personal weapon, a device capable of reducing a building to atoms. "Stand back. This creature belongs to the Zephyrian Empire." The Voidwalker turned its attention to the Queen, and Sarah felt the temperature in the chamber drop by 20 degrees. When it spoke, the words formed directly in everyone's mind. "You stole from the deep currents. You tortured our child. You turned Guardian into weapon. What justice do you offer?" The Queen's weapon hand trembled as the full weight of alien intelligence focused on her. I offer fair trade. Return to your space and we will not pursue you." The Voidwalker's response was patient but implacable. "You misunderstand. We do not bargain with those who harm children. We offer you choice. Face judgment here, or return what you have stolen and depart this reality forever." Sarah felt the Guardian stirring, its massive form beginning to rise as strength returned to limbs that had been deliberately weakened by its captors. But instead of aggression, she sensed something else. Compassion, even for those who had heard it. The Guardian spoke, its words reaching everyone in the chamber. "I choose mercy." These beings acted from ignorance, not malice. Let them learn. Let them grow. Let them choose better paths. The Voidwalker's attention shifted, considering their child's words. Sarah realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. A being that had every right to demand vengeance was instead choosing forgiveness. But forgiveness, she was about to learn, was not the same thing as allowing the abuse to continue. The Voidwalkers had come not just to rescue their lost guardian, but to ensure that such theft could never happen again. Queen Zarathul was about to discover that there were some beings in the universe that even her mighty empire couldn't conquer, and some prices that conquest couldn't justify. The Voidwalkers' judgment was unlike anything Sarah could have imagined. They didn't destroy the Crimson Throne or slaughter its crew. Instead, they did something far more profound and terrifying. They made everyone aboard experience what the Guardian had experienced. Queen Zarathul collapsed to her knees as waves of psychic energy washed through the ship. For the first time in her life, the conqueror of worlds felt helpless, afraid, and completely at the mercy of beings far more powerful than herself. Every moment of pain, every instance of deliberate cruelty, every day of hopeless imprisonment that the Guardian had endured was shared with those who had inflicted it. "Stop!" The Queen gasped, her forearms clutching at her head. I understand. But the Voidwalkers weren't finished. Through her connection with the Guardian, Sarah felt their communication expanding outward, reaching beyond the ship to every Zephyrian vessel in the fleet. The same lesson was being taught to thousands of beings simultaneously. Not through violence, but through understanding. Research Director Kaleshin was weeping, her scientific detachment shattered by the emotional reality of what she had helped to do. The guards had lowered their weapons, many of them staring at the Guardian with expressions of horror and remorse. "We didn't know," one of them whispered. "We thought it was just a beast." The Guardian, now fully restored to consciousness, turned its massive head toward the guard who had spoken. When it replied, its voice carried no anger, only sadness. "You did not ask. You did not look. You chose not to see." Sarah felt the weight of those words settling into the minds of everyone present. The Voidwalkers weren't just teaching a lesson about cruelty. They were demonstrating the responsibility that came with consciousness itself. The obligation to recognize consciousness in others. The largest Voidwalker turned its attention to Sarah, and she felt herself being gently lifted from the floor by forces that bypassed gravity entirely. For a moment, she existed in the spaces between dimensions. seeing reality from perspectives that her human mind could barely process. Small guardian, the entity communicated directly to her consciousness, you saw what others chose to ignore. You offered kindness where none existed. You restored hope where it had been deliberately destroyed. What do you seek as reward? Sarah's mind raced as she considered the implications of the question. Here was a being of almost godlike power offering her anything she could imagine. Wealth, knowledge, abilities beyond human comprehension. But as she looked at the guardian of the deep currents, still bearing the scars of its long captivity, she knew what she truly wanted. I want the war to end, she said simply. Not through conquest or destruction, but through understanding. I want beings to choose cooperation over domination. The Void Walker's amusement rippled through dimensions. You ask for much, small one. The changing of hearts is more difficult than the moving of stars. But not impossible, Sarah replied. You just proved that. You made them understand in minutes what years of fighting couldn't teach them. Through her connection with the Guardian, Sarah felt the Void Walker's ancient consciousness considering her words. These beings had existed since the early days of the universe, watching civilizations rise and fall, seeing the same patterns of conflict repeat endlessly. But perhaps, through the eyes of a simple human veterinarian, they were seeing new possibilities. Queen Zarathul struggled to her feet, her entire worldview shattered by the experience of helplessness. When she spoke, her voice lacked its former arrogance. What do you want from us? The Guardian answered before the Void Walkers could respond. I want you to remember what you felt just now. I want you to carry that understanding with you always. And I want you to make a choice? The chamber fell silent except for the barely audible hum of the ship's systems. Even the alarms had stopped as the crew throughout the vessel struggled to process their shared experience. What choice? The Queen asked quietly. The Guardian's form began to shift as its natural abilities fully returned. The artificial modifications fell away like old skin, revealing the creature's true beauty. Its body was composed of what appeared to be living starlight. Patterns of energy that flowed and danced in ways that spoke of intelligence and artistry evolved over millions of years. Choose to see others as they truly are, the Guardian said. Choose to recognize consciousness wherever it exists. Choose to protect rather than dominate. Queen Zarathul looked around the chamber at her guards, her researchers, her subjects. Sarah could see the internal battle playing out across her alien features. Everything her culture had taught her about power and dominance was being challenged by the undeniable reality of what she had just experienced. And if I refuse this choice? The Queen asked the Void Walkers. Response came as a collective statement that seemed to originate from the spaces between atoms. Then you will discover that the universe is much larger than your empire, and that consciousness comes in forms far more powerful than you have imagined. It wasn't a threat, exactly. It was simply a statement of fact. The Zephyrian Empire's expansion had finally encountered beings they couldn't conquer, and those beings were offering a path forward that didn't involve mutual destruction. Sarah watched as Queen Zarathul processed the implications. The Queen had built her power on the belief that might made right, that the strong had the inherent right to dominate the weak. But the Void Walkers had just demonstrated that she wasn't the strongest force in the universe, not even close. I will consider your words, the Queen said finally. But I cannot speak for my entire empire. The Guardian moved closer to Sarah, its massive form somehow managing to convey gentleness despite its size. You have given me the greatest gift possible, it told her. You have reminded me who I was before they tried to make me into something else. Sarah placed her hand on the Guardian's head one more time, feeling the warmth of consciousness restored and the deep currents of ancient wisdom flowing beneath the surface. Thank you for reminding me who I am, too. I came here thinking I was just a veterinarian. But maybe we're all guardians in our own way. The Void Walkers began to withdraw their presence from normal space, preparing to return to the dimensions they called home. But before they departed completely, they left behind something unexpected. Not weapons or technology, but knowledge. the understanding of how to recognize consciousness in all its myriad forms, and the wisdom to know that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the choice to protect. As the alien entities faded from visible space, Sarah realized that her mission was far from over. Queen Zarathul might have been given a profound lesson in empathy, but changing the course of an entire empire would require more than a single moment of understanding. It would require ongoing commitment to the difficult work of building bridges between species that had been enemies for generations, but for the first time since the war began, Sarah felt genuine hope that such a future might be possible. 3 months after the encounter with the Void Walkers, Sarah stood in what had once been the Crimson Throne's bio-containment level, now converted into something unprecedented in Zephyrian history. A medical center dedicated not to weapons research, but to healing trauma across species lines. The Guardian of the Deep Currents had chosen to remain aboard the ship, not as a prisoner but as a teacher. Its presence had a profound effect on everyone who encountered it. Former weapons researchers now spent their time learning about consciousness and empathy. Guards who had once inflicted pain were training as healers. "Dr. Chun," called Commander Torres through her communicator, "we're receiving another delegation request. This time from the Nexari Collective. They want to learn about the healing techniques you've developed here." Sarah smiled as she watched a Zephyrian technician gently adjusting a neural interface designed to help rather than control. The same technology that had been used to torture the Guardian was now being repurposed to treat psychological trauma in other species. "Tell them they're welcome," she replied. "But they'll have to wait their turn. We've got delegations from 14 systems scheduled already." The transformation hadn't been instant or easy. Queen Zarathul had returned to her capital world profoundly changed by her experience, but convincing the Zephyrian ruling council to embrace a new philosophy of cooperation rather than conquest had taken weeks of intense debate. Many nobles had demanded she be removed from power for showing weakness. The turning point had come when the Guardian itself had addressed the council through quantum communication arrays. Its words, translated into concepts that Zephyrian minds could grasp, had carried the weight of ancient wisdom and the promise of growth beyond their current understanding. "Wars end not when one side defeats another," it had told them, "but when all sides choose to see each other as worthy of existence. You have the opportunity to lead your people toward a future where strength is measured by what you protect, not by what you conquer." Not every Zephyrian world had accepted the new direction. Several outer colonies had declared independence rather than embrace what they saw as surrender to alien influence. But the core worlds had voted to implement what was being called the Consciousness Accords, agreements that recognized the rights of all sentient beings, regardless of species or technological level. Sarah walked through the medical bay, checking on patients that would have been impossible to imagine just months ago. A Zephyrian soldier was receiving treatment for PTSD alongside a Nexari civilian who had lost his family in the war. A young Kaleri engineer was working with human technicians to design prosthetics that would work across multiple species. "Dr. Chun," said a voice behind her. "You have a visitor." Sarah turned to see Research Director Kalatian approaching. But the arrogant scientist she remembered had been replaced by someone profoundly humbled by experience. Kalatian now served as the Guardian's primary liaison, helping to translate its teachings into practical applications. "The Guardian wishes to speak with you," Kalatian continued. "It says there's something important it needs to share." Sarah found the Guardian in what had once been its prison cell, now converted into a communication chamber that allowed it to maintain contact with the Void Walkers in their dimensional home. The massive being had grown even more beautiful as its trauma healed, its body now radiating patterns of light that seemed to respond to the emotions of those around it. "Small Guardian," it greeted her, the term having become something like a title of honor among its people. "I have news that will please you. My people have made contact with the refugee settlements in your home system." Sarah's heart leaped. "Are they safe?" "The camps were running low on supplies when I left." "More than safe," the Guardian assured her. The Void Walkers have shared their knowledge of dimensional farming. Your people will never lack for resources again. But more importantly, they have chosen to join the growing alliance of species committed to the Consciousness Accords. The implications were staggering. The refugee camps that had begun as desperate collections of war survivors were becoming the foundation of something entirely new. A multi-species civilization based on cooperation rather than competition. There's more, the Guardian continued. Queen Zarathul has made a proposal that requires your input. She wishes to offer the Crimson Throne as a neutral meeting ground for the new alliance. But she insists that you serve as the chief medical officer for all diplomatic missions. Sarah considered the offer carefully. It would mean leaving behind any hope of a quiet return to veterinary practice on some peaceful world. But it would also mean being at the center of the most important work being done in the galaxy. What do you think I should do? She asked. The Guardian's response came with a warm pulse of bioluminescent patterns. I think you should do what you have always done. Look at the beings who need healing and help them remember who they truly are beneath their wounds. Through the communication arrays? Sarah could sense the presence of other consciousnesses joining the conversation. Void walkers, yes, but also representatives of species she had never heard of. Beings from distant galaxies who had detected the quantum signatures of the Consciousness Accords and were curious about this new approach to interspecies relations. The work we're doing here, Sarah realized aloud, it's not just about ending one war. It's about changing how consciousness itself interacts across the universe. Yes, the Guardian confirmed. And it began with a single human, veterinarian who chose to see a broken being and offer healing instead of judgment. Sarah looked around the chamber that had once been a place of torture and was now a center of learning and growth. The transformation seemed impossible, but it had happened through the accumulation of individual choices. Her choice to help rather than harm, the Guardian's choice to forgive rather than seek revenge, Queen Zarathul's choice to change rather than cling to old patterns of dominance. I accept, she said finally, but I have one condition. This ship becomes more than just a meeting ground. It becomes a traveling hospital, a mobile center for healing trauma and building understanding between species. The Guardian's joy rippled through dimensions, reaching the consciousness of beings across vast distances. Then let us begin the next phase of this work. The universe is vast, and there are many beings who need to remember that they are more than their wounds. As Sarah began planning for the conversion of the Zephyrian Empire's most feared warship into a vessel of healing, she reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. She had started as a simple veterinarian caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But perhaps there was no such thing as the wrong time to offer kindness to a suffering being. The war that had seemed destined to consume entire civilizations was transforming into something unprecedented. A cooperation of consciousness that spanned species, dimensions, and perhaps even time itself. And at the center of it all was the simple recognition that every being, no matter how different or alien, deserved the chance to be seen and understood. The Guardian of the Deep Currents had found its way home, not to a place but to a purpose. And Sarah had discovered that sometimes the greatest adventures began not with a hero's journey, but with a healer's choice to see the being beneath the wound and offer hope, where none had existed before. In the depths of space, the ship that had once carried only death now carried something infinitely more powerful. The promise that consciousness could choose to grow, to heal, and to become more than the sum of its traumas.